Happy Tuesday evening, everybody. I know I said I'd be going live when the first game ended, and technically there's still about 21 seconds left in the game, but Kevin Durant sealed the outcome of that one. Good game from Claxton, too. Showed up pretty big, played well. So not surprising that the Nets got the win there. That's sort of, I think, what was expected, and it's definitely coming right down on that spread. I didn't actually see where it closed. I didn't get to look right before game time, but, we're right in that 8 to 10 point range. So right about where the book said it would be. Looks like it's going under, though, most likely. So interesting. In the first game, we got a big game coming up. Actually, I got to switch hats. What the hell am I doing? Got the baseball going, but, my Timberwolves play next. Got to rep the Timberwolves as long as I can. Who knows how long they're going to be around to rep, even though I didn't pick them. All right. So day one of the play-in tournament is almost in the books. So we're going to go ahead and in between the games here, break down the games that are for tomorrow. Like yesterday, trying to go a little bit deeper again as we get into the playoffs, really try to find those edges. Today, I'm ending up in a place different than where I started when I first looked at these games and looked at these lines. So it'll be interesting to go through them, see what you think. As I said yesterday, I am trying to pay more attention to the comments. And I know that I can't see the comments from Twitter, but if you jump on over to the YouTube channel, you can comment there, and I will do my best to pay attention to those. And if you have thoughts or questions, throw them in there. And, at least as I get through each game, I'll stop and kind of see if anybody has thoughts on these games as we're going. So this is NBA Breakdown for Wednesday, April 13th. First up tomorrow, we have the Hornets at the Hawks, Atlanta -5 and a 236 total. These teams played most recently on March 16th, and Charlotte won 116-106. In this game, Collins is likely to still be out. There hasn't been 100% official word on that yet, but it doesn't sound promising with where the injury is at. I think it's likely he could come back in the playoffs at some point, assuming that Atlanta moves forward, but he's going to probably be out for this one. Again, no official word. Hayward's still going to be out. So like yesterday, I want to start out just breaking down the matchups, Charlotte's offense, Atlanta's defense, and then vice versa. So let's start out with Charlotte's offense and how they've been doing lately. So over the last 14 games, they've actually had 121.3 offensive rating, and away from home, it's been 123.7. So this is a team that's really been humming offensively, especially away from home. And we know all throughout the year, there's never been a question whether Charlotte has the offensive talent to put up a lot of points. The question is just whether that talent will come through. This is a really young team. It's an inconsistent team. It's a team that sometimes gets in a groove and plays well together, and other times they don't. And I think that could potentially be problematic in a playoff game as well. Atlanta, obviously, going to the East Finals last year, had a lot of great experience. And that's just experience that Charlotte doesn't have, especially with these young guys. Oh, man, only 10 seconds left. Brooklyn's up 5. So it looks like the Cavs have a good chance of covering the spread here. Anyway, anyway, no question about Charlotte's talent. The question to me will be with their youth, is that talent able to come through in a high-pressure situation? But last 14 games, 123.7 offensive rating away. Very good, obviously. Last 10 games specifically, it's kind of interesting because in the last few games of the season, they scored 124, 133, 128. So really high scoring. But when you drop back before that, they have 3 of the next 6 games that are under 110 points, and then 2 of them that are under 120, which obviously is still good. But given that offensive rating, it's relying a lot on the most recent games. So that's something to keep in mind. As we get toward the end of the season, it's a little bit harder to rely on those games because teams aren't playing everybody or whatever it is. And so if we drop back a little bit before, the scoring was a little bit depressed. Away from home more recently, 133 most recently, but again, that was the next to last game of the year. Before that, 115, 114, 125, 119, and then they actually did have a 134 and a 142 away from home. Again, we're seeing that high upside potential that Charlotte has, but also seeing half the games living in the mid-1 teens again. And then I did go look at how they fared against bad defenses. We're going to talk about whether Atlanta's defense is bad or not. That's debatable, but I would say at least at times this year they have been. And when I'm capping this game, I would rather err a little bit on the side of thinking that Charlotte's offense will do a little too well versus not well enough. That's just my bent in how I'm capping this. So against bad defenses, they've put up 124, 133, 125. But here again, after that, it was 106, 116. So they have definitely done relatively well when they've played defenses that aren't very good. But a couple games that are a little bit depressed offensively in there. And I do think there's something to be said. We're going to talk about Atlanta's defense, but I do think there's something to be said for the increased intensity of the playoffs and probably a lot better defensive effort by both teams than they give on a regular basis during the regular season. And so I would think, if anything, those point totals could end up a little bit lower. Brooklyn just won 115, 108. Ooh, 7 points. Cleveland covered it. All right, there we go for the first one. Glad I didn't take that, because yesterday I said if anything it would be Brooklyn, but stayed away for a reason, I guess. All right, on to Atlanta's defense. So their defense in the last 14 games, 113.7 defensive rating, which is relatively solid in and of itself. But when we look at home specifically, their defensive rating has been 108.4. And I think this holds pretty true to a lot of what we saw through the season, where Atlanta tended to play better at home and especially defensively at home than they did on the road. And that's been true recently here as well. In their last 10 games, they've allowed a lot of games in like those mid-one teens again, 114, 13, 18, 15. They do have 2 games in the last 10 that are under 110, and they've allowed over 120 twice. So again, what we see is that regular range in the mid-one teens, and then a couple outliers up into the 120s and a couple outliers down under 110. At home, their 4 most recent games were not as solid. 118, 122, 131, 121, then 112 before that. But really, like, it's surprising their defense. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. I'm reading my notes wrong. That's their offensive rating. We're going to get to that in a minute because it's better. I was like, this is way too good. How have they too bad? How have they given up this many points? Okay. So at home, scrap what I just said, 103, 115, 107. They have 4 of their last 10 games are under 110. Man, I got to mark these notes out better. 4 of their last 10 under 110. And then only 1 of them over 120. So actually for Atlanta defensively, they have been playing well, especially at home. And then against good offenses, which it's debatable if Charlotte's a good offense, but we know they have the capability to be a good offense, they've done okay. In the last 8 games, 3 of them have gone over 120. 3 of them are in those mid-one teens, and 1 was at 105. So they have allowed a decent amount of points to good offenses. But again, I think Charlotte being a good offense in the playoffs is a bit debatable. Okay, sorry for confusing everyone. But just to recap, Charlotte's offense been playing well recently, been playing well away. Atlanta's defense playing well at home. So it's a little bit of a clash in that way. Now let's flip over and talk about the numbers that I was just talking about, but they actually belong to Atlanta's offense. Atlanta's offense over the last 14 games, 119.2 offensive rating, 119.9 at home. So pretty consistent home and road for Atlanta here recently, close to a 120 offensive rating. So while Charlotte's offensive rating is incredibly impressive, Atlanta's not very far away. In the last 10 games, they've definitely been up and down some, but they've had 4 of their last 10 over 130 points. 2 more over 120, and only 2 under 110. So their offense really has been playing well. When you look at their games at home, it's kind of even better. There's 2 at 112, but other than that, the rest of the last 8 are 120 or more. Understandable. When you look at their offensive rating, you'd expect it to be good. But I think the thing that I see a difference in between Charlotte and Atlanta is that Charlotte's numbers are skewed by some disproportionately high scores. So they had a 142, a 134, a 133. Atlanta is much more consistent offensively, putting up good offensive numbers in almost every game. And there's been less inconsistency for them, especially at home. Now, when they play decent defenses, which again, debatable whether Charlotte's a decent defense, but let's just err that way for a second. They've been up and down with their scoring. They've had, out of their last 10 games, they've had 4 of them under 110 points, only 2 over 120. So if we think Charlotte is a good defense, then that would potentially be one Achilles heel. Wager Rager with the hard-hitting questions in the comments. Any thoughts on why Ben Simmons dressed up as Gumby tonight? Dude, I have no freaking idea. You need to comment and tell me why he dressed up as Gumby. I don't know why Ben Simmons does anything, man. That's going to be fun breaking down that series. It's going to be an interesting one. So Atlanta's offense, consistent, playing well. Is Charlotte a good defense? Well, let's talk about it. Last 14 games, 116.9 defensive rating. Not good, not terrible. But 124.4 away from home. So yes, their offensive rating has been good away from home, but their defensive rating has been terrible. They've just played higher scoring games. Now, this also, though, just like their offense, this is skewed defensively as well. In their last 10 games, 2 times they gave up 144 points consecutively to Miami and maybe Philadelphia. And other than that, they've lived in those one teens a lot and even had 3 games under 110 in their last 10 games. So those high scoring games are skewing their defensive numbers just like it skewed their offensive numbers. Again, more inconsistent. Away from home, we see the same kind of thing. However, the floor away from home in their last 8 games, they gave up 110 once. And that was the best that they've done. So they don't have any shutdown defensive performances, I wouldn't say. And then when they play against good offenses, which I would contend right now, Atlanta, especially at home, is a pretty good offense. They've done okay here. They do have 2 times out of the last 10 games where they've allowed under 110 points. A lot of them, again, living in those one teens. But then they have these spikes, 144, 132, 130. This is just what we see with Charlotte, that they can slow people down, but they do allow things to spike up a little bit here and there. I just noticed my face is getting pink because I have this extra monitor on the game. Maybe we'll flip over to something else so it's just more white or something, not pink. All right, so that's looking at the key matchups between offense and defense. I think that Charlotte has the potential to stay in any game, but they are more inconsistent, and I certainly would trust Atlanta more in this situation, especially with the playoff experience they have, and Charlotte having a young team that makes them a little less trustworthy. When we look at the trends in this game, a few things that I would point out. The Hornets are 10-4-1 against the spread in their last 15 as a road underdog. But on the other side, the Hawks are 6-0 against the spread in their last 6 games as a favorite. And so there are some positive trends on both sides in terms of in-season. The in-season trends do definitely lean toward the under. And then matchup trends, specifically, the Hornets are 3-1-1 against the spread in the last 5 meetings in Atlanta. So there is this one trend that's pointing that way. The under is 6-1 in the last 7 meetings between these two teams specifically. So again, we have something pointing to the under. Big picture for this game, I think what we have is a team that has playoff experience, is going to be ready for what it takes to come in and win a playoff game, and another team that's young and has potential, but I think is a year or two and some experience away from really making a run and making a dent. Atlanta, both teams have good offenses. Both teams at least can play good defense, though I would contend that Atlanta's defense has been more consistently good, especially at home. So I do lean with Atlanta in this game. However, with the spread at 5 now, that's pushing the limits of where I see this game going. So I actually lined this initially as a 2-point spread. I do think after talking through it, I could see widening that out, maybe even all the way up to 4 or 5. I think if it's a close game, the Hawks will come through at the end. But I don't really feel comfortable laying more than that, especially with the volatility that can come with the Hornets. In terms of the total, I lined this at 115, 117, so that would be a 232 total for me. With it at 236 right now, and especially with the strong trends, both in-season and matchup trends pointing to the under, I do like the under in this game. That's something that I actually already bet, is the under 236 at minus 105. It's the only bet I've made in this game so far. This total did start around 238, so if you jumped in early, you got the better of this. We'll see where it moves from here. All right, so that is the first game, Hornets at Hawks. Next up, we have the Spurs at the Pelicans. New Orleans minus 5.5 and a 226 total. It's no shocker to anyone that's watched me this year that the Pelicans are a team that I actually think has a ton of potential. Talked about how I like their roster construction. I definitely think getting CJ McCollum was a really important move. He, along with Brandon Ingram, are guys who can carry a team on a given night. Not that they're massive superstars, but they're like all-star level guys who can carry a team at times. So I like the Pelicans, and I went into breaking this game down expecting to come out wanting to bet the Pelicans. Cliffhanger, whether that's where I end up or not. You probably know where I'm going, but let's jump into the breakdown of things here. So these teams played a couple times recently on March 18th and 26th. The Pelicans blew the Spurs out 124-91. And DeJounte Murray did play in that game. There were some near the end of the season where he didn't, but he played in that one. And then on March 26th, the Spurs won 107-103, so a very low-scoring game for these two teams. Looking first at San Antonio's offense, they have a 116.2 offensive rating their last 14 games, and it's 118.9 away, so they've played slightly better offensively away than they have at home, and this is actually something we saw through a lot of the season. There was a stretch more in the middle of the season where, man, I was betting San Antonio team totals over and even against the spread a decent amount almost every night when they were away because they just played so much better than when they came home. So I don't think being away for this game is a detriment to them. If anything, it might be a little bit of a benefit. Over the last 10 games, a little bit of up and down, but a lot of games, again, in those mid-1 teens, they have spiked all the way up to 133 in their last 10 games, so they do have that upside offensively. Away from home, as you would expect, a lot of games actually 120 plus. 4 of their last 8. The low they've had in their last 8 games away is 107. So it hasn't dipped that low for the Spurs. And then against bad defenses, which again, we'll talk about where the Pelicans have a bad defense, but against bad defenses, they again have scored really well most of the time in the mid-1 teens and up. Pelicans defense on the other side. In the last 14, their defensive rating's been really respectable at 114.7. The problem is at home, it's been 119.4. And when you get up toward a 120 defensive rating, that's just really not very good. And that's where they've been at home. Last 11 games, I went back that far because they actually ended with this strong stretch. So out of 11 games, the 5 that are furthest back were all under 110 points. The more recent ones, 128, 141, 94, 109, 119. So I think we see something here similar to what we saw with the Hornets, and that is that the Pelicans' defensive numbers are a little bit skewed by the fact that they have 2 or 3 games where they allowed an incredibly high number of points, and 2 of those were the last 2 games of the season. And so I don't want to put too much stock into that. Maybe we even drop back and say that a realistic view of their defensive rating is something more like the 115 that they have overall than the 119 that they've had at home. Against good offenses, which I would say the Spurs have, they don't have the ability to be a great offense. I think they have the ability to be a decent offense. But against good offenses, the Pelicans defense has once again been very up and down. They've actually in their last 8 games allowed over 130 points 4 times. Not great. However, they've held teams under 110 3 times out of the last 8. So it's really been feast or famine for them defensively in their last 8 against good offenses. So when we look at this, I think Doug McDermott is still going to be out in this game. I haven't seen anything indicating otherwise, and I do think that hurts the Spurs a little bit. I've talked before about how it's beneficial to them to have as many shooters as they can on the court around DeJounte Murray so he can create and have people that he can kick to. The Spurs, though, I think have learned to play without him. And before I forget to say this, I do think having Greg Popovich on the sidelines for a game like this is a helpful thing. I'm not saying that's going to win him the game or anything, but I think he'll come in with a good plan. And I think that San Antonio's offense is going to come in and be effective against the Pelicans defense. However, the Pelicans offense might be effective too. Oh, one other thing I want to roll in here is I just ran the numbers on the Pelicans with and without CJ McCollum, and their defensive rating is basically the same with or without him this season. It's 114.6 and 113.4. So pretty much a wash, not a big difference on defense. All right, let's switch over to the Pelicans offense, which has actually been pretty solid here late in the season. Their last 14, their offensive rating is 116.8, but 121.1 at home. So again, we're getting over that 120 offensive rating. Really solid. Last 10 games specifically, it's been a little up and down. They have dropped all the way down to 100, but again, have lived in those mid-1 teens and even broken over 123 times in their last 10 games. At home specifically, it's been actually really good. They did score 102, 103, 107 in 3 out of the last 10 at home. But other than that, they have 4 games over 120. The others are in the mid-1 teens. It's been solid at home for the Pelicans lately. Against mediocre defenses, which it would probably be kind to call the Spurs defense mediocre, but we'll call it that for now. Again, they've scored pretty well, though they have dropped all the way down to 103 a couple times. So the Pelicans, the problem is they don't blow out the teams they should blow out. And sometimes they hang in there with the really good teams. I would assume they're going to come into a playoff game really ready to play regardless of opponent, but they've proved themselves to be less trustworthy than I had hoped they would be, given the potential of this roster. But the offense is decent. Now, this is one where for some of you, you're like, shit, dude, you've gone deep enough. Can we please come up for air and move on? If that's you, just plug your ears for a minute, because I'm going to go one more level deeper on this game. I tried to look into why the Pelicans struggle sometimes and not others. And this isn't totally a shocker, but there's a really strong correlation for them when their field goal and three-point shooting percentage combined are less than 80. They really struggle. They've scored 107, they did 114, 100, 103, and they've lost those games by 21, 27, 19, 4. They did win by 3 and 10. But just overall, there's a pretty strong correlation. When their field goal and three-point percentage are over 80, they've scored 127, 123, 116, 126. You get the picture. And they've won 4 out of the 5 most recent games where that was the case by 33, 14, 8, 17. So there's this breaking point at the combined field goal and three-point percentage of 80. Well, how did the Spurs do against that defensively? The Spurs have allowed opponents in their last 10 games to have over 80 combined field goal and three-point percentage in 5 of 10. So how the hell does that help? It's half the time. I mean, I guess all it says is that we can't count on them being strong defensively or being completely shitty defensively in regard to the shooting percentage of the Pelicans offense. All right, switching over quick now. We'll try to go a little quicker here through the Spurs defense. Last 14, 113.3 away, which is actually very overall solid for them. 111.3 away from home. So this is what we have combined for the Spurs in the last 14 games. 119 offensive rating away from home and 111 defensive rating. That's a solid combination. Away from home, the points they've allowed has definitely been up and down, but they've held teams under 100 twice in the last 10 games, 103, 108, and they do have 4 games over 120. So again, like I said, volatile. We can't count them to be great. We can't count on them to be terrible. And then against good offenses, which I would say the Pelicans have the potential to be and can be at times, though they are not consistently. Again, it has been very up and down, though most of the time they've allowed 119 or more. I think it's 7 out of the last 10 games they've done that. Although they've gone all the way down to holding Denver to 97, had a 103. So San Antonio's defense has been decent, is the best way I can say it. Like through a lot of the season, they were terrible, played in all these high-scoring games, but finishing up the year, it just hasn't been quite as much the case. And then one thing I forgot to mention is offensively, with and without McCollum, this is where he's made a difference. 118.1 offensive rating with him, only 110.2 without him. So having McCollum's a big deal for the Pelicans. There's no doubt about it. In terms of matchup stuff here, the Pelicans and Spurs are both near the bottom of the league in percentage of points from three-point range. So unlikely to be a three-point barrage, though McCollum has brought a lot of three-point shooting to the Pelicans. That could be beneficial for them. Also, the Spurs, surprisingly, number 2 in points in the paint, though this I would think is more from people driving to the basket. I don't think Jakob Poeltl is dominating the paint. The Pelicans are number 9 defending points in the paint. So I think that's a place where they can at least put up some good resistance. Pause real quick here. Wager Rager's giving me some serious prices. Nets 130 versus Boston after they won that game. That I'm not shocked. I think that's going to be a really good series. I'm going to have to do a little more work on this. He says Celtics are plus 100. This is a little bit of a diversion from tomorrow's games, but I think the Celtics still have a decent chance in that series because they can show up defensively. So plus money on them is a little tempting, but I'm going to take the time to dive a little deeper before I do anything with that. Hard to go against Kevin Durant in the playoffs. I wouldn't take that lightly. So that'll be fun to dive into more. I think I may be Wager Rager, and I may be doing a NBA pod on his channel about the playoff series here coming up. So, all right, we talked about the matchup. Let's get back to this game, back to the trends. The Spurs are 5-0 against the spread in their last 5 games as a road underdog, but the Pelicans are 4-1 against the spread in their last 5 games as a home favorite. Kind of wash, right? There are strong in-season trends for both of these teams. There are also very, very strong in-season trends for the under. So I would just say, to give you a sense, I look at a couple places to look at in-season trends, and generally I just look for, certain trends that seem to have a special relevance to a specific game, but then also overall are 70% of the trends leaning one direction or the other. I would say about 90% of the trends, in-season trends, were leading toward the under on this game. In terms of matchup specific, the Spurs are 8-1 against the spread in the last 9 meetings between these teams. The under is 7-1 in the last 8 meetings. I line this game close to a pick'em. Looking at all the factors, that's where I came out. Like I said, I think having Greg Popovich on the sidelines doesn't hurt. The Spurs numbers were better than I thought, and it seems they've regrouped a little bit here at the end of the season. They're not a great team by any stretch of the imagination, and I actually think the Pelicans' upside is much better, but it's one game. And just going off the numbers and even going off the trends, I'd have to take the points here with the Spurs. And actually I did. I already put a bet on the Spurs plus 5.5. The Pelicans have a chance to blow them out, but I see this game staying closer. And then in terms of a total, this is right. So here's where I came out, is I lined this even as a little bit of an over. 227, 228 is the neighborhood I was in. But I actually ended up taking the under here. I think I might have gotten it at 227. I'd have to go back and look for sure. And the reason I did is two. Number one, there are so many strong trends pointing toward the under, and I try not to put too much weight on those, but when they're really overwhelming, I give them a little bit more credence. Number two, in a playoff game, a 1-game playoff, I expect the defensive intensity to be high in this game. And so if anything, I would expect the number to come in lower than where I would normally cap it for a game between these two teams. And so for that reason, I actually did place, I think I have 2 units on the Spurs plus 5.5, 1 unit on the under in this game. All right, so that is the 2 games for tomorrow. Hoping to be back then with a breakdown of the last play-in games, and then Friday, just watch for the time. I think it's going to be around 8:30 Eastern. Going to be going live, hopefully with a couple guys. Pig Vig is in for sure. If you have followed him at all, you know he's a really sharp guy on the NBA. And then I think Sam from Source Podcast is going to be able to join. We'll see if he's able to or not. But Friday night, we're going to be going through breaking down all the first round series in the NBA. Like I mentioned, also watch, if you don't follow Wager Rager, go follow him. Think we're going to be doing a podcast on these first round NBA series as well. That'll probably be before Friday. So a lot of NBA content coming up. Would really appreciate guys, doing all this work. It's fun. I enjoy it. But if this is helpful to you, I certainly always appreciate the comments, the retweets, likes. If you listen on the podcast, to go and review. Appreciate all that stuff. So hope you guys have a great night. I was going to say let's go Timberwolves, but my bet is on the Clippers. So what do I want to say? I don't know. Maybe let's go Clippers and then let's go Timberwolves in the next one. But I guess I win and lose either way on this one. Got to try to divorce the betting from the fandom. So, hey, have a great night, everybody, and I'll see you guys on Twitter.